Thanks for tuning in to the Our Lads Football Network as we're talking Cleveland Browns football. And whenever we do that, Fred Greetham joins us from the Orange and Brown Report, 247 Sports. How's it going, Fred?
Oh, it could be better for the Browns. I mean, far cry from last season to be 3-11 at this point for sure.
Yeah. A very strange set of circumstances, no question about it. That's why we wanted to have you on here. And maybe Browns fans will enjoy this because a lot of them are thinking about 2025 already. But before we get into that, what happened in 2024? Because it happened pretty quickly as far as the visual. You could just tell from the opening game. And you even mentioned this when we were previewing the season. We talked about the offensive line as something to watch, not just because Bill Callahan ain't around, but there was just some injury issues. Nobody had been the Lions haven't been communicating and been together during the preseason, and they were just going to be thrust into the opening game, and it hasn't been good since. So what went wrong?
Well, there's a lot of issues. I mean, starting with the 2023 season ended with their three top tackles on injury reserve. I think they counted on all of them being ready to start the season. Two of the three started the year still on the injury list, on the physically unable to perform. And that didn't get them off to a good start. But I think the overriding problem was their quarterback. Deshaun Watson historically played, worse than just about any quarterback in the NFL history. Now, the team said it was, not just him, it was everybody. But there was a noticeable difference last year when he got injured and Joe Flacco took over and the offense came alive. Well, then Watson was coming off that shoulder injury. He never played in the preseason. They were kind of nursing him along to get him ready for the regular season. He was ready to start the season. But in the 7 games he played, the most points the Browns put up was 18, and that was a game they had a safety. So they were getting 15, 16 points a game when he was under center. Certainly there were some other issues, but his play was terrible. I mean, he was ranked at the 32nd in every metric, QBR by ESPN, NFL passing rating, and then he gets injured, and Jameis Winston comes in, and immediately the offense took off, and in his first 6 games, they averaged 311 yards a game passing. Now, he had an issue with interceptions as he has in the past, but I just think that beginning start, 1-6, buried the season. The coach said every week that they weren't going to switch from Watson. They felt he gave him the best chance to win. And most people watching, we all are saying he certainly cannot be giving you the best chance to win. How about trying your backup quarterback almost like a relief pitcher, bringing him in?
Yeah.
Because they played the Giants and lost by 6 points. They lost by 4 points to the Raiders. Those are both 2-win teams. And they still could have won both those games. They had the ball in the last possession, and they had one where they had a touchdown call back, and they had another one where, an interception on the last play. But my point was, in baseball, you go to the relief pitcher, and what we've seen with Winston, you could almost say that they might have won 2 or 3 other games to start if they would even made a change instead of just sticking with Watson those first 7 games. Obviously, hurt his Achilles, out for the season. I don't know how long they would have went with him if he wouldn't have been injured, but that forced the hand. And the offense was much better since. There's been problems with interceptions, but the defense, which played so well last year, had a big drop-off, particularly later in the season. They played pretty well the first 6, 7 games. They only given up 16, 18, 20, 21 points. In fact, if the offense would have scored 22 points, they would have won 4 or 5 more games early in the season. But then the defense kind of caught whatever the offense had
Yeah.
and they've dropped, into the 20s, in their defensive side of the ball when they were ranked number 1 last year. And the special teams hasn't been much better. So it's kind of been one of those snowballs. But I I think there's a lot of factors, but I pin a lot of it on offense, particularly the quarterback play was abysmal the first 7 games of the year. I mean, like I
Okay.
said, they were putting up historic numbers for bad production. Obviously, it's not all on the quarterback, but there was a marked difference, like you saw last year when Joe Flacco came in and when Jameis Winston came in, or
Yep.
even Dorian Thompson Robinson for that matter. When Watson went down the first half against the Bengals, for that game, they had DTR as the backup, and he came in and he got things going right away. And then he got hurt, and Winston finished the game, and then Winston started since. So it's just really been, I pin it back to that 1-6 start. I mean, you buried your season just by inept offensive play to start the year.
Okay. Uh, what's the future of that position? Do you think the 2025 starter is on the roster?
After yesterday, I don't. I think Jameis Winston, I mean, I think he, I kept looking to his start when he was with the Saints under Sean Payton. When Drew Brees retired, he started the season in 2021 5-2. He threw 14 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, and then he tore his ACL and was out for the season. He hadn't really started since until he got this chance, and he was really playing well. He had some interceptions, but he was throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns. I think he had something like 11, 12, 13 or touchdowns with only like 4 or 5 interceptions. But now he's had like 8 in the last 3 games, and now he's got 13 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He's kind of fallen back into the old Jameis Winston. Now, like yesterday, there was a ball went off a receiver's hands for an interception. He's had that 2 or 3 times, but he's still thrown too many. But he hasn't had really a great running game. And so he said back when he was doing well with the Saints, they were really balanced. They had a good running attack. And I think there is some truth to that. And so I just feel like they're going to explore every option to get a new quarterback. I don't know if they like anybody in the draft. I don't know if they're going to draft high enough to get who they want in the draft. If not, they may look for the veteran guy, whether Kirk Cousins becomes available that Stefanski's worked with in the past, or go back to Jacoby Brissett, or what they may do. But they may bring Winston back, but I just at this point they're talking about even benching him. If they bench him this week, then I would think that would kind of close the door, on him.
Okay. Yeah, and I think this is actually going to be a draft where if you look, unless it's Sanders, because I think he's the only one that might get drafted high. Which again, I think any of these quarterbacks that gets drafted high this season, the general managers are smoking crack. Most of these quarterbacks, including Sanders, are not. I don't even think Sanders is a first-round quarterback. But it's the NFL, and they're going to get drafted high. And they're going to get drafted. Some of them, like Sanders, will get drafted higher than they're supposed to. But I also think that for Browns fans, I think if they want a quarterback, they're going to get one because a lot of these guys will be available because you're going to be crazy to draft some of these guys really early. They're just not that talented. But again, we're all looking for the quarterback. I mean, I'm a Jet fan. I'm sure we'll be looking for one. But the Browns haven't found one in a while, and that's their name. They found one, Baker Mayfield, and look what's happened to him. So I know the pain of Browns fans, no question about it. All right, so let's talk about that running back position because Chubb, again, he breaks his foot. I mean, it's just sad what's going on with this kid. Does that mean that next season, including wide receiver, that the skill positions, because Njoku's been banged up all year and Cedric Tillman has not taken off, do they just need an influx of skill position offensive players this offseason?
Well, I'd say yes. I think you could add the offensive line. I mean, that was a problem early on. I mean, Watson was getting sacked at a pace of historic numbers. I know he ran into a lot of them, and hang on to the ball, but I do think that the line's getting older. But actually Tillman really started taking off with Winston, at quarterback, or even that DTR, his first game when he came in, Tillman had like 3 catches, and in that game he had like 8, and we're whoa. And then he continued it under Winston. Then he got the concussion against the Steelers. But the bright spot has been Jerry Judy. I mean, that was their signature offseason move. I was a little skeptical because they traded for him basically on potential. They signed him to a bigger contract on potential, and he didn't really show a lot until they moved Amari Cooper and they changed quarterbacks. And since Winston took over, he has just taken off. I mean, he's in the top 5 of NFL receiving yardage. I mean, went over 1,000 yards yesterday. And so I think they found somebody there. I think Tillman, they're high on him. And what I've seen, I mean, he had like in I think the first 5 games he was, I don't have the stats in front of me, but he went from 3 catches to 29. So he had 26 catches since they moved on from Watson, or Watson got hurt,
Okay.
and Amari Cooper was traded. So I think he's had the concussion this year, and he had it, I think, at the end of last year. So that's been his problem is those. They expect him back this week. So I think if he can play the last 3 games, maybe he can finish on a strong note. But I think they do have to make some decisions. Running back, Jerome Ford, had a pretty good game yesterday, the long touchdown. You feel bad for Chubb. Everything he went through, he wasn't the same. And some of the thought was, how about shutting him down before he has an injury
Yep.
and let him now just spend the whole season getting ready for next year? Because most experts will say your next year after, a major knee injury. And he worked very hard. He just was on the cusp, but he just didn't seem to have that breakaway speed. I don't know if he'll ever get that back, but now a foot injury. Stefanski said he doesn't think he needs surgery. It didn't sound like it's a major. I don't know if it's like a stress fracture or a crack or what, how severe, but it's not like a knee. So he should be able to, I would think, be ready for most all the offseason program. And, you know, as hard as he works, if anybody's going to be able to come back next year, the problem is, yeah, he's a free agent. Brown's restructured. He had a big contract. Instead of cutting him, they gave him some guaranteed money, to come back with incentives. I think they're going to do what's right with him. The one thing about this organization, could be even to their detriment, is they kind of go out of their way to do what's right. Nick Chubb is very beloved in Cleveland, and I think they'll do whatever to bring him back. He has not indicated he's ready to move on or retire. He said he wants to finish his career with the Browns. He said that last week, and I think they will do everything. But as a business, I think they do have to look and see if they can get, a game-breaking running back, because you can't count on him being that. And Jerome Ford has spots, but I don't know if he's a bell cow back as well. And they're going to probably use a committee of 2 or 3 backs anyway. But Njoku has had a banged up season. So he was pretty much the only legitimate tight end they had, Pro Bowl caliber. So they have a lot of areas they have to address. And that's just on offense. So
Yeah.
a lot of the players they were expecting just underperformed or injured or for whatever reason.
Yeah, speaking about that line, and look, we knew there would be a drop off without Callahan there, but the injuries and the production just really dropped off. Who was the biggest disappointment? Because once again, I mean, Willis can't stay healthy. He's on IR right now. They have a few other guys also. I mean, DeJuan Jones is on IR. Who was the biggest disappointment?
Well, I would say Wills would, because, this was a chance to show if they should keep him. They gave him a 5th-year option, and that's what he was playing on this year. And he had an MCL last year, and everybody thought he'd be ready because it wasn't as severe, and he just never was right all year. And so he's going to be moving on. And they thought because Wills did a business decision and didn't play in a game, they didn't have another option at left tackle, so they threw DeJuan Jones over there, and he actually played pretty well. He played better probably on the left side than he did on the right side in his time. And they decided to make him the starter over Wills. And then he started 3 games, and then he broke his leg. And so you didn't really get him to play the rest of the year at left tackle to cement that he's your answer. But I think my guess is they feel like they saw enough that he can be the long-term answer. If you get a 6'8", 375-pound
Yeah.
guy that can play left tackle, they have him on a rookie contract. I think that's going to be going forward their plan. Jack Conklin came back. They gave him a big contract. He was injured a couple years, and he actually has probably played the best at right tackle. So I think they need to shore up the interior. You don't know if Joel Bitonio is going to retire or come back again. Wyatt Teller, Ethan Posick. I think they can use some more depth in there. They did draft Zach Zinner last year in the 3rd round, but he didn't play a whole lot. So, again, yeah, I think all the way around you can make a case, but I think the most disappointing might have been Jedrick Wills because they thought, he was going to maybe step up this year and try to earn that next contract.
Okay, and then on defense, um, again, there, as you said, there were moments, but and of course they lost their young linebacker early this season too. That never helps. So I guess the same question: what was the most disappointing aspect of the defense, and and this is we'll get into a question of the head coach, but if the head coach is back, will the defensive coordinator be back?
Yeah, I think Jim Schwartz would be. I mean, I don't think he lost his mojo. I mean, I think they kept and they brought the team back pretty much intact. The only real addition was Michael Hall, their top pick from Ohio State, and he started off with a 5-game suspension from the league, and then he got hurt. He just came back yesterday. They brought back some of those 30-something guys like Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst and veterans. They brought in Quentin Jefferson, who ended up getting waived a few weeks ago. Zadarius Smith, they traded him at the trade deadline, was actually playing pretty well. I think they, again, were doing him right because he had a chance to go to the Lions. So I don't know. I think overall the most disappointing part on the defense was the cornerback play. I think Denzel Ward might have had his best year, but MJ Emerson, they were talking about him, and he was talking about Pro Bowl and Greg Newsome. And I just didn't see it this year. I felt like Newsome and Emerson dropped off in their play. Those 3 guys, Ward, Emerson, and Newsome, talked about having the best corners in the NFL. I think maybe Ward, but the other 2, I don't think so. They picked up the option for Newsome, so he's under contract for $13-14 million his 5th year next year. I think he's not worth it. And Emerson, I think he has a ways to go. When you're going to play man-to-man, they couldn't play man-to-man all the time because they weren't able to lock down, the receivers. And so it's been disappointing overall. I think if you look at a stat, it'd be the takeaways. They just didn't take the ball away, this year at all. They didn't do that much last year, but they were number 1 in yards given up, and this year they've dropped down, to like 21st. But they're still low in the takeaway. I mean, the turnover ratio for this team is like -16. The offense turned it over 6 times yesterday, or special teams in the offense, but they had no takeaways. So, that's a big part of an aggressive defense is taking the ball away, and they just haven't done it much.
Has anybody on defense, you mentioned Ward, you believe he might have had his best season? Anybody else on defense that stepped up? We know how good Myles Garrett, of course, is, but anybody else? Anybody that was maybe a little bit of a surprise?
Well, JOK was having a great year, and they've missed him when he got hurt against the Ravens, hurt his neck. We really don't know his status going forward. Um, he's been rolled out again this week. He's on injury reserve, so it'd be like 7 games, and I doubt if he'll come back this year. We've got no update other than coach said, no, I'm going to roll him out this week, but at the appropriate time, we'll give an update. The only little indication we got was not good. We talked to middle linebacker Jordan Hicks a few weeks ago about him, and he said, well, we're all praying for a miraculous recovery. And so the red flag went up when he said that. How serious is this? Is this career threatening or is that or what? So he was playing well. Denzel Ward's played well, Myles Garrett, of course, but I don't know if really anybody else other than some guys that have stepped up since Mahmoud Diabate, undrafted linebacker. It's pretty much filled the shoes of JOK, has played pretty well. Winston Reed was an undrafted guy off the practice squad that's played pretty well, since getting a chance. But, there's been Michael Hall's done a little bit, but he hasn't been on the field enough to really make an impact. So, yeah, it's all the way pretty much been disappointing, on that side of the ball.
Yeah, speak about the rookie class in general. You mentioned Hall's been out most of the season. So how else did you mentioned Zinter's played only a little bit. Has anybody played enough at all? I mean, is this class just one of those, redshirt years kind of?
Yeah, Jamari Thrash, is starting to get a little bit, but he's really not played much. And the injuries to Hall and Harden, he was the cornerback. Both those guys were activated off injury reserve yesterday, so they've missed a meat of the season with injuries. Nathaniel Watson has just been on special teams. There's really not been much to show for it. Zach Zinter played early when they had some injuries, but he didn't play the greatest, so he hasn't really played much since. The jury's out with this group for sure.
Okay. Got to talk to you. Okay, so let's talk about the coach then. Will he be back, head coach?
Well, the owners kind of give a vote of confidence, briefly last week to ESPN. He said that they feel good about they don't understand why the record is what it is. I still think that these 3 games are important. You lose all 3. I don't know about 3 and 14. I know they don't want to go through that process again. They like having Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski meshed up. Stefanski was voted NFL Coach of the Year 2 out of the first 4 years here. But how do you explain that they're leading the league in pre-snap penalties and false starts and stuff like that this year? And you're just seeing a lot of mistakes. So I don't know if anything, I think anything can happen. I felt like if they were going to make a move, they might have made it earlier because they have Mike Vrabel in the building. He actually was a consultant, but he's ended up being on the field like a coaching. I see him every day at practice. He's in the building. I think he's going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah.
I would think if you were going to make a change and you had him in your building and you liked him, that you would make that change before the end of the year when then it's a free-for-all. So I really don't think they're going to make a change coaching-wise because every time they do, unless they have somebody lined up, and that's why I said Vrabel, because we've seen this before. You fire the coach, then you get in line and you go after somebody, and they've ended up with their 5th, 6th, 7th option several times because it's like, hey, you don't want to come here?
Yeah.
This isn't a desirable job right now because of the Deshaun Watson contract and his situation. And there's just like Jim Harbaugh. I knew when he jumped on that Chargers job, that's a good situation. You have a quarterback like Justin Herbert that's young. And so that's such a big, most teams looking for a head coach don't have a quarterback
Yep.
established. So, yeah, I think they're going to keep the status quo, but
Okay.
you lose 3 games, and if you lose 3 games badly, anything could happen.
What is going on with Watson? What are they going to do there with him?
I think they're going to work around his contract. You have guaranteed money, and they have that built in. It's 46 million for the next 2 years, but it's the cap hits. So I think they would come back. He's the injury with the Achilles. I don't know if he would be ready even for the start of the season. Certainly, they have to make decisions, and I think they move around him. And personally, I think he would be inactive every game next year. They're not going to say that, kind of like he was his last year, but they can restructure him again. We have a salary cap guy that works on our staff, and he's laid it all out. They can restructure him. He'd be 37 million against the cap next year, and as the salary cap keeps going up, they can absorb it. But if you cut him or trade him, it's like 119 million against. It's like half the salary cap on him.
Okay.
So they can't say, we're not going to play him. We're moving on.
Yeah.
But I think there's
Yeah.
there's been a lot of here in Cleveland because somebody told one of the reporters locally that they expect him to come back to compete for. Well, you're going to say things like that, but they're seeing the same thing we all see.
Yeah.
For them to say, "Oh, he gives us the best chance to win," I know they don't believe that when they were running him out there. So, and I don't think the owner's dictating he has to play because of the money he's being paid. You got to
Okay.
pay him whether he's on the team or not. But it's the salary cap hit that you absorb, which would make it so you can't do anything else. If you
Yeah.
just say we're cutting him, you have to wait. Like I don't know all these cuts, but like June 1st, 2026 seems to be the most likely time to designate him to be released or whatever.
Okay. So what you think is going to happen is he'll be here next year. He's not going to play. And probably by June of the following year, that's when they'll let him go.
Yeah, he could be. I would expect he starts the year on the PUP list,
Okay.
and either he never gets off it or he goes to IR. He still gets paid, or they have to put him on the active roster. There's things with the NFL, NFLPA that you can't say, we're not going to play the guy. We're not going to
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah.
those type of things.
Okay.
But it would be a disaster PR wise here in Cleveland now. Everybody's moved on from him. He's not even around. He's in Florida or whatever, rehab, and so I just think that, they will work around the contract.
Okay.
And that's just something, sunk money they've already spent. But what's your options?
Yep.
You have to come up with a plan,
That's it.
to work around it. And you have to save some money so you can do something.
You just mentioned that the owner's not getting involved. I know there are fans out there that believe the opposite. I'm sure that's why you mentioned that. How involved is ownership, and has ownership been, and how responsible is this current ownership with how things have been going on with the Browns on the field?
I think for so many years, he was firing guys after 1 year, and that's one of the reasons I feel like they don't want to go through all that again. They feel like they got young guys in their fifth year, growing together, 42 and 37. Now you can look back and say, well, you thought you had something going, but where are you at now? It's been has it been a disaster, or is this a fluke year, or what? It comes back to evaluating talent and all those things. But the owner, I really think he wants to stay out of it. He writes the checks. He was certainly involved in signing off on the Watson move, but I don't think he said, go get this guy, until Watson turned him down and they went back and said, okay, we could get back in it if we offer him 230 million guaranteed, and he signed off on it. But
Yeah.
I
Who
don't think he was
wouldn't?
pounding the table, for that.
Okay.
I think he just wants it to work so bad he was willing to write the checks. He's been willing to spend about 50 million more than all the average NFL team in these upfront cash bonuses, which allows them to work around this salary cap. And so that's why I think that they will do that going forward here.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's very difficult. That's why I ask, because it's very difficult for fans to really know how much their owner is impacting the team, because you hear a lot of things. Things are written about owners all the time. Sometimes they're true and sometimes they're not. So it's kind of difficult. I mean, I know from my experience as a Jet fan how difficult it is to know whether the owner is the one that is really the problem. But you think right now, because we've talked about it the last couple of years, it does seem like the people, at least that are running this team, I'm talking about, the general manager, you talked about, the three guys that are very, connected together, that they've done a really good job personnel wise, especially without first round draft picks. And yet all of this fell apart, which is why you said, who knows? I mean, this could just be a bad year, and it could be. I just find it hard to believe that all of a sudden these guys don't know what they're doing as far as how to put a roster together, when it kind of does look like they know what they're doing. But just like every team in the NFL, you can't be successful until you figure out the quarterback position.
Well, and that's it. Who really is at fault at the quarterback? Because a lot of us don't think Deshaun Watson is the type of quarterback that Kevin Stefanski really prefers to work with. He's always worked with the Kirk Cousins, the Case Keenums, the drop back passer type thing. He did not. I don't think he really wanted to move on from Alex Van Pelt. I think that was brought in by the general manager to bring in, Ken Dorsey, who has worked more with the spread and the things that Watson, and that didn't work out at all. And so, yeah, where does it lie? And that's where, okay, if Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski decided on their own without the owner involved, yeah, I think that that's a case to get fired. But if the owner said, go get Deshaun Watson, then how could they get fired if the owner brought him in? So I believe them when they say it's collaborative. I think they all get together and they talk as a group. You also have Paul DiBattista, who's the strategy officer who makes a lot of the plans. How big is he involved in? Did he recommend this move? That's where everything comes back to, because we haven't really seen, of the 5 years, Andrew Berry's only had a first round pick twice.
Yeah.
And he had Jedrick Wills with the 10th overall pick. That's a big miss.
Yep.
Greg Newsome with the 26th pick, I think, or whatever it was. That really doesn't look that great.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, but what you lost in draft capital in these last 3 years of 3 first round picks and I think 3 second round picks, you should have 3, 4, 5 starters, if not a couple Pro Bowlers in there. And so you look at, the rest of the draft picks. Has he done good or has he not done good? He's done the best, I think, in trades. He traded for Amari Cooper, traded for Jerry Jeudy, that type of a thing. But I think it goes back to the owner is willing to spend the money. That's how they were able to get some of those guys, because they absorbed the contract. And so that's why there's a lot of decisions and a lot of things up in the air, and you're not really going to know, because they're not going to tell us what they're doing at the end of the season, because you really can't tip off But when they start making moves, then you're going to finally know what they really thought of some of these guys they had and so forth. So, yeah, overall, it's a mystery. It's a little frustrating trying to guess what they're thinking.
I know it's early, and maybe it is too early to ask this as before I let you go. But is there? You just mentioned the type of quarterback that Stefanski wants to work with. Do you see one out there yourself? Have you had the time to look around and go? I know you mentioned Brissett, but I'm talking about like I mean, it's Sam Darnold. I mean, is there someone out there that the Browns could actually bring in to work with Stefanski and to immediately be the guy that hopefully can not only start this year, I mean next year, but for the next several years?
Right now, based on the way they talk, I feel that they don't think it's a total rebuild. You still got Miles Garrett in his prime and Denzel
Yep.
Ward in his prime, JOK, assuming he's healthy in his prime. A lot of these players, but they're getting older. The first one that comes to my mind would be Kirk Cousins. Okay.
Oof.
The Falcons drafted Penix with like the 7th or 8th pick. If they don't make the playoffs, I can see them moving on. Stefanski worked with Cousins, and he seems to be the type of quarterback that he would fit in well with him. Sam Darnold could be another one. Like I said, Jacoby Brissett was here, and that's I don't know what they think if with Jameis Winston. I mean, like I said, the offense kind of exploded. Recent weeks, he's kind of went back to the interception thing. That's to
It's
me
early.
more of the Stefanski model. And that would tell, but you have to play your hand. You can't get even Winston back if you tell him you're going to come back and be the backup, or that type of a thing. And so who's going to be available? Everybody that when you look at the draft, I talked to one of the top draft guys, off the record, and he said he didn't see anybody in his initial study that he felt was that Joe Burrow, that Andrew
No.
Luck,
Nope.
the guy that you want to be lucky enough to have the first pick that
Not
year.
this year.
And as you said, most teams that need a quarterback force the issue, and guys get drafted above. So that's what I would think the Browns would kind of take that same approach and look for a bridge type quarterback who might be the best available. That year, Baker Mayfield was entering his final year here. They felt Deshaun Watson could be that guy for 10 years. And in fairness to them, they know how important the position is. And they saw this guy lead the NFL in passing yardage, and he just looked great the last time, in 2020. And so they moved the earth.
Yeah.
Obviously the Texans didn't tell them everything that was going on, and then they became part of that whole situation, and they got everything dumped on them, which is their fault. But I know, once they tipped their hand that they were looking at a quarterback, Mayfield said, I want out of here. And they had to do what they did. Didn't work out. I think you have to take a look and try to do whatever you can do within your constraints to do the same thing this year.
Fred, always great talking to you and catching up on what's going on with the Cleveland Browns. I know the fans, the viewers here on our channel appreciate it. We'll have links in the description for all of your content and how to hook up with you on social media. And we look forward to talking to you again, probably somewhere right around free agency of the draft, so we can get a lot better of an idea of what's going on as far as the not a rebuild, but the improvement of the Browns roster this upcoming offseason.
Sounds good. A lot to talk
Excellent.
about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Fred.